I still remember the way my father looked at me that day, calm, detached, like a man making peace with a decision he didn't have the courage to explain. My name's Nathan. I'm 33, and if you told me 5 years ago that my own family would stab me in the back over the company I built from scratch, I'd have laughed it off. My dad used to tell me I was his pride, that I had the family fire in me, the drive to build, to create, to make something out of nothing. And I believed him. I believed every word because I wanted to. He was my father. You don't expect betrayal to come from the same man who taught you to ride a bike and helped you write your first business plan. Growing up, our family wasn't poor, but we weren't comfortable either. Dad worked as an accountant for a small logistics firm. Mom ran a small flower shop out of our garage, and my older brother, Kyle, was the golden child. Everyone in the neighborhood knew it. He was taller, smoother, and always seemed to know what to say to make people like him. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one, the kid who stayed up at night sketching designs for products that didn't exist yet. I wasn't good with people back then, but I was good with ideas. And ideas, I learned early, can build empires if you know how to sell them. After college, I started small, freelance consulting for logistics companies, then tech integration for shipping networks. I remember working out of a rented storage unit that smelled like old paint and metal. I slept on a cot in the corner and ate instant noodles for dinner most nights. My father would drop by sometimes, shake his head, and say, "Nathan, you're too stubborn for your own good. Get a real job." But when the business started growing, really growing, suddenly, I wasn't just the stubborn one anymore. I was the visionary. He started introducing me to his friends as my son, the entrepreneur. I didn't realize then that those same introductions would one day feed the resentment that tore everything apart. By the time I hit 29, my company, Apex Logics, was pulling in serious numbers. We specialized in AI-driven logistics optimization for mid-sized supply chains. Fancy way of saying we made shipping cheaper and faster for companies who couldn't afford the big players. I had 12 employees, most of them young, hungry, and loyal. We weren't huge, but we were profitable. The kind of profitable that draws attention. And one of those paying close attention was my father. At first, it felt nice, having him ask questions, show interest, even offer advice. "You should bring Kyle in," he said one day over lunch. "He's been struggling to find direction, and it might be good for both of you." I hesitated, but I loved my family, and Dad sounded so proud saying it. So, against my gut, I brought Kyle on as a business development director. I even gave him a small salary to start, thinking it would motivate him. But it didn't take long before I realized I'd just invited a fox into the henhouse. Kyle was charming with clients. I'll give him that. He could walk into a room and make everyone feel like his best friend. But behind the scenes, he was careless. He'd make promises we couldn't keep, miss meetings, forget details. He started taking credit for deals I closed, claiming he'd helped facilitate them. And Dad believed every word. "See, Nathan, your brother's really turning things around. You two make a great team." I'd bite my tongue and nod, knowing full well Kyle was draining more value than he added. But Dad didn't want to hear that. Then there was Mom. She loved us both, but she had this unshakable belief that keeping the peace mattered more than keeping things fair. "Don't make it a competition," she'd say whenever I tried to bring up Kyle's mistakes. "You boys need each other." I used to wonder if she ever realized how much that line cut into me. Because to her, my frustration wasn't justified, it was jealousy. And to my father, it was disrespect. The first real fracture came about a year later when I discovered that Kyle had been using company funds to lease a brand new Mercedes for client meetings. When I confronted him, he laughed. "It's a business expense," he said. "You think clients are impressed when their cutting-edge tech partner shows up in a 10-year-old Honda?" I told him he had 1 week to return the car or pay for it himself. He called Dad. The next day, I got a call from my father saying, "You're being too hard on your brother. You need to learn to delegate." That word, delegate, haunted me for months. I was working 16-hour days, negotiating with suppliers in Singapore, coding late into the night, and handling payroll myself. Meanwhile, Kyle was out playing golf with clients he barely remembered the names of. Yet, somehow, in my father's eyes, I was the one who needed to lighten up. Still, I tried to keep things together. I thought if I just proved myself harder, if I grew the company big enough, successful enough, Dad would finally see that I wasn't just the other son. So, I doubled down. Landed our biggest client yet, a nationwide retail chain worth millions in annual contracts. That partnership was the turning point. It made Apex Logics a real contender in the logistics space. Investors started calling. Newspapers wanted interviews. My name was finally out there. And that's when my father really started showing interest. He began dropping by the office more often, walking around like he owned the place, giving little speeches to employees, talking about our family vision and the legacy we're building. The first time he said we, I let it slide. The fifth time, I started to realize what he was doing. He wasn't just proud, he was planting a narrative. One where the business was a family project. One where Kyle's role was just as important as mine. It got worse at family dinners. I'd mention closing a new deal, and Dad would immediately redirect the praise. That's great, Nathan. And Kyle, I heard you introduced him to that contact? See, teamwork pays off. Kyle would smirk, raise his glass, and say, anything for the family. I'd go home some nights, sit in my car outside the office, and just stare at the building lights flickering through the windows. That was my life in there. My sacrifice. My years of failure and grinding. And yet, somehow, it was slowly being rewritten as something we all did together. Then came the day everything shifted. It was a Sunday morning. My parents invited me over for breakfast. Nothing unusual, but the tone on the phone was different. My dad sounded formal. When I walked into the living room, Kyle was already there, wearing that smug smile I'd come to hate. Mom was nervously fiddling with her coffee cup. Dad cleared his throat. Nathan, your mother and I have been talking. You've done amazing work with Apex Logics. Truly. But as the company grows, we need to think long-term. Legacy, succession, structure. I felt a cold knot in my stomach. Okay, what are you saying? He looked me dead in the eye and said, it's time to make Kyle a full partner. Equal ownership. For a moment, I didn't even understand the words. Equal ownership? Of my company? The one I started alone with nothing but a laptop and an overdraft bank account? I laughed, thinking it was a joke. You're kidding, right? Dad didn't flinch. No, Nathan. This isn't about ego. It's about family. About ensuring you both have a stake in what you built together. Kyle leaned back, trying to look modest, but failing miserably. It just makes sense, bro. You're the brains. I'm the people person. You can't do it all yourself forever. I turned to Mom, searching for even a flicker of disagreement, but she just looked down at her coffee. That silence hurt worse than anything else. That was the first time I felt something inside me start to crack. Not anger, not even betrayal, just this dull realization that maybe I'd been naive the whole time. That I'd built my dream inside someone else's illusion. And I wish I could say that was the worst of it. But that was just the beginning. Because a few months later, my father called another family meeting. And what he told me next, that's the day everything truly fell apart. The day my father called that second family meeting, I already had a bad feeling in my gut. I'd spent the past few months walking on eggshells, trying to manage a business that suddenly had too many cooks in the kitchen. Kyle had become a full partner, at least on paper, though I was still the one running every meeting, every project, every sleepless night, trying to keep our systems from collapsing under new contracts. Meanwhile, Kyle was on social media posting motivational quotes about entrepreneurship and family legacy, like he was some sort of visionary. He'd tag me in his posts too. Proud to build something great with my brother. It was infuriating, but what could I say without sounding bitter? Everyone around me saw us as a duo. Dad made sure of that. He'd call me after reading Kyle's posts and say, "That's great PR, Nathan. You should be grateful your brother's so good with people." I wanted to scream, he's good at taking credit for my work, but I didn't. I told myself it wasn't worth the fight, that the numbers didn't lie. Apex Logics was thriving, and I still had control. Or at least, I thought I did. That morning, when I pulled into my parents' driveway, Kyle's shiny Mercedes was already parked next to Dad's SUV. I parked my old Civic behind it, the irony not lost on me. Walking up the porch steps, I caught sight of Kyle through the window. He was laughing with Dad, leaning back like he owned the place. Mom was setting plates on the table, glancing nervously between them. That same old unease washed over me. The kind you get when you know everyone else in the room has already read the script and you're walking in blind. "Morning, Nathan," Dad said when I came in, his voice too upbeat. "Sit down, we've got a lot to talk about." I sat, pretending not to notice Kyle's smirk. "What's going on?" Dad folded his hands. "We've been reviewing the company's structure, and I've spoken to some advisors, family business consultants, actually. They believe Apex Logics has grown beyond a startup. It's time to formalize leadership. I frowned. Formalize? We already have contracts, equity splits, governance documents. He cut me off with a wave. That's not what I mean. You can't be the only one making big decisions anymore. Kyle's your equal now, and that needs to be reflected. Kyle leaned forward, clasping his hands like a TV lawyer. Basically, we both have signing authority. Any major deal, any new client, either of us can approve or reject. Keeps things balanced. Balanced. The word made my jaw tighten. So you want to give someone who doesn't even understand half our software final say on business decisions? Dad sighed, like he was the one being patient. Nathan, this isn't about competence, it's about fairness. You've got to stop treating your brother like a liability. I'm not treating him like a liability, I snapped. I'm treating him like someone who hasn't earned it. Mom flinched. Nathan, please, but Dad's tone hardened. Watch your attitude. You're not a child anymore. This isn't just your playground. That word, playground, hit like a slap. It took everything in me not to storm out right there. I forced a breath and said quietly, "So what exactly do you want me to do?" Dad exchanged a glance with Kyle before saying, "We're making Kyle co-CEO." For a second, the room went completely silent. Even the ticking clock on the wall seemed to hesitate. I stared at my father, searching his face for a hint that this was some cruel test, some ridiculous hypothetical. But he just looked calm, resolute, like he'd rehearsed this 100 times. Kyle broke the silence with that infuriating grin. "It's a formality, man. We're equals anyway. Titles just make it official." I stood up, chair scraping the floor. "You're out of your mind," I said, voice trembling. "Dad, you can't just—" "I can and I did," he interrupted, raising his voice for the first time. "This company wouldn't even exist without the foundation I gave you. The advice, the contacts, the seed money. Don't pretend you did it alone." Seed money. He was talking about the $5,000 he'd lent me 6 years ago, a loan I'd repaid with interest. That one phrase told me everything I needed to know. He'd rewritten history in his head. Now, Apex Logics wasn't my creation anymore, it was his legacy. And Kyle was the heir apparent. I left without another word. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my office long after everyone went home, staring at the company's financial dashboard on my monitor. My company, my team, my dream. And now it was being split in half because my father couldn't admit that his favorite son wasn't the one who made it happen. Over the next few weeks, things got worse. Kyle started asserting his authority in meetings, overruling my decisions, making promises I couldn't keep. He'd walk into client calls late, crack a few jokes, and leave me to clean up the mess. I confronted him once, told him he was going to drive us into the ground. He just shrugged. "You're too serious, Nate. People like me more when I'm relaxed. You should try it." Meanwhile, Dad kept backing him up. Every time I complained, I was overreacting or being territorial. It was like living in a funhouse mirror version of my own life, where logic didn't matter and merit was replaced by manipulation. Then one day, a client emailed me directly, a big one of our earliest supporters. Their message was polite but firm. "We'll be working with Kyle from now on. Please direct future correspondence to him." My stomach dropped. I called them immediately. The client, a middle-aged CEO named Martin, sounded uncomfortable. "Look, Nathan, we like you. You've always been great. But your brother said you were taking a step back from operations. He said you'd approved it." I didn't even respond. I just sat there in silence, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. When I confronted Kyle, he acted innocent. "Relax, man. I was just restructuring communication. You're busy. I'm just trying to help." I nearly lost it. "You lied to a client." He smirked. "I delegated, remember? Isn't that what Dad said you should do?" That was the first time I slammed my office door so hard the glass rattled. A few nights later, I went over to my parents' place to talk, really talk. I thought maybe I could reason with Dad if I caught him alone. But when I arrived, Kyle was already there. Of course he was. Dad was in his study, going over spreadsheets. "I don't want to talk about this again," he said before I could even start. "You don't even know what happened." I protested. "I know enough," he said coldly. "Your brother's been doing good work, and you can't handle it. You've always struggled to share credit." I just stared at him, stunned. "You think this is about credit? He's sabotaging our clients." "Stop exaggerating," he said, waving me off. "You're emotional. take some time off. Let Kyle run things for a bit. It was like he'd flipped a switch and turned me invisible. After that conversation, I stopped going to family dinners. Mom called every week, begging me to visit, saying, "Your father doesn't mean it like that." But I couldn't bring myself to face them. I buried myself in work, trying to keep what little control I had left. Then came the email that changed everything. It was from our largest client, the one that accounted for nearly 40% of our revenue. They were terminating the contract effective immediately. The reason? Leadership instability. I sat at my desk for a full hour just staring at the screen. When I finally checked the attachments, my blood ran cold. It was a thread of emails between Kyle and their operations manager. Kyle had been negotiating new terms behind my back, offering them services at unsustainable rates just to make himself look like a hero. When I tried to reach out to fix it, they'd lost all trust. That night, I went home, poured a glass of whiskey I didn't even want, and stared at my reflection in the window. I looked like a ghost of myself, eyes sunken, hair messy, shirt half untucked. And for the first time, I thought seriously about walking away, just leaving it all behind. But I didn't. Not yet, because part of me still wanted to believe there was a line my father wouldn't cross. That maybe, just maybe, if he saw the damage Kyle was causing, he'd finally wake up. That illusion lasted exactly 1 week. The next family meeting wasn't at their house. It was at the office. Dad called it a strategic announcement. Everyone was there, employees, investors, even the local business journal. I stood in the back, confused, until I heard my father's voice over the microphone. "Effective today," he said, smiling proudly. "I am pleased to announce that leadership of Apex Logics will transition fully to Kyle Harrison, our new CEO. Nathan will be stepping down to pursue other interests." The room went quiet. My heart stopped. I turned toward him slowly, barely hearing the applause that followed. He looked right at me from the podium, steady, emotionless, and said the words that would haunt me for the rest of my life. "You'll understand someday." And just like that, everything I had built, every sleepless night, every risk I'd taken, was gone. When the applause died down, I just stood there, frozen. My father's voice kept echoing in my head. "You'll understand someday." It wasn't just the words. It was the calm certainty in his tone, the way he said it like he was imparting some great life lesson instead of gutting his own son in front of a room full of people. Everyone clapped politely, not knowing what had just happened. Some even smiled at me as if I'd been part of this transition. I remember one of my employees, Clara, looking at me with wide eyes, silently mouthing, "What's going on?" I couldn't even answer. When it was over, I walked out without saying a word. Past the cameras, past the handshakes, past my brother's smug grin as he basked in his new title. The building I'd built, the brand I'd created, the people I'd hired, all of it now belonged to someone else. I got in my car, started the engine, and just drove. No destination, just away. I don't know how long I was on the road, but by the time I pulled over, I was somewhere outside the city, parked at a rest stop overlooking a stretch of highway. I sat there in silence, hands gripping the steering wheel, watching the sun sink below the horizon. My phone buzzed over and over, texts, calls, emails, but I couldn't bring myself to look. Eventually, I turned it off and just stared at the darkening sky. That's where I stayed until I fell asleep, slumped in the driver's seat like a stranger in my own skin. The next morning, reality hit like a slow wave. I didn't have a job. I didn't have my company. And technically, because I'd signed some of the family restructuring paperwork under pressure months earlier, I didn't even have ownership. My brother and father had quietly diluted my shares during one of the corporate restructurings. I still had a small portion, but not enough to control anything. They'd planned this. Every conversation about legacy and succession had been part of a slow takeover. I spent the next few weeks in a haze. I couldn't eat properly, couldn't sleep. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. with my heart pounding, flashes of that announcement looping in my head. I tried talking to Mom once, but she avoided taking sides. "Your father's just trying to keep the peace," she said softly. "You know how he is. Maybe you can find a way to work together again." I laughed bitterly. "Mom, he took everything." Her voice trembled. "He didn't mean to hurt you." But he did, and he didn't even flinch. The weeks turned into months. My savings dwindled fast. I'd invested so much of my personal money into Apex Logics that my liquid assets were nearly gone. I rented a tiny apartment on the edge of town, the kind with thin walls and flickering lights, and tried to figure out what was next. For a while, I just didn't. I'd wake up late, scroll through job listings, and close the laptop halfway through. I wasn't ready to start over. I wasn't ready to pretend like what happened was normal. But here's the thing about hitting rock bottom. It doesn't announce itself. One day, you just look around and realize there's nowhere left to fall. And once you know that, something strange happens. You start moving again, even if it's just out of defiance. For me, it started small. A former client reached out, one who'd left Apex Logics because of management changes. He said, "Nathan, I don't care who's in charge now. You were the one who made things run." He needed help with a logistics issue, just a short-term consulting gig. It wasn't much, but it was something. I hesitated before saying yes, partly out of pride, partly out of fear that I wasn't ready. But the first day I sat down with his team, explaining systems and solving problems again, something clicked. It felt like breathing after months underwater. Word spread slowly. Within 2 months, I had 3 clients. All small businesses, all people I'd helped in the past who wanted me, not the name Apex Logics. I worked from my apartment at first, then from a co-working space downtown. I called the new venture Stratos Consulting. Something about the name made me feel like I was rising above the storm. It was nothing glamorous at first. I did everything myself, coding, analytics, even client billing. But unlike before, I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I didn't have investors to please or a family to prove something to. It was just me and the work. And somehow, that felt peaceful. Around that time, I ran into Clara again, the same employee who'd looked at me in shock during the announcement. She'd quit Apex Logics shortly after I left. "Couldn't stand working under Kyle," she said, rolling her eyes. "He's got charisma, sure, but no clue how the system works." She asked what I was doing now, and when I told her, she smiled. "If you ever need help, I'm available." I didn't realize how much I'd missed having a team until then. A month later, she became my first hire. From there, things picked up speed. More clients came in, mid-sized retailers, manufacturers, even a small airline. They all said the same thing. "We don't want a flashy pitch. We want results." And results were something I could deliver in my sleep. Within a year, Stratos had an office, 5 employees, and a reputation for being the quiet powerhouse in logistics tech. But even as I rebuilt, the ache of betrayal lingered. Every success felt tinged with bitterness. I couldn't stop wondering what Apex Logics was doing, or how it was faring under my brother's leadership. I tried not to check, but occasionally, curiosity got the better of me. At first, they seemed fine. Their social media was full of buzzwords and press photos. Kyle shaking hands with clients, Dad smiling beside him. But I could tell from the phrasing of their posts that they didn't actually understand what they were doing. They'd talk about revolutionary new systems that sounded suspiciously like my old designs, only watered down and badly executed. Then one day, I got a call from an old contact, the operations head of a company that used to be Apex Logics' biggest client. "Nathan, are you available for a meeting?" he asked. "Sure," I said cautiously. "What's this about?" He hesitated. "Off the record, things aren't going well with your old company." When I met with him, he didn't hold back. Apparently, after I left, Apex Logics' systems started collapsing under mismanagement. Projects were late, data was inconsistent, and communication was chaos. "Your brother means well," he said diplomatically, "but he doesn't listen to anyone. It's all ego." I listened quietly, trying not to smile. I should have felt vindicated, but instead, I felt this strange mix of anger and pity. They'd taken everything from me, and now they were drowning in the very thing they stole. That night, I sat on my apartment balcony, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like the forgotten son or the scapegoat. I just felt free. Still, I wasn't ready to move on completely. Part of me wanted to let them fail quietly, to just watch from a distance while karma did its work. But another part, a darker, colder part, wanted them to know exactly what they'd lost. That part of me started whispering ideas, not out of hatred, but out of clarity. If they'd built their empire on my foundation, maybe it was time to remind them who'd poured the concrete. Around that same time, fate decided to intervene. The biggest surprise came in the form of an email from an address I hadn't seen in years. Apex Logics' old client, the national retail chain that once made us famous. The subject line read, Need your expertise. Urgent. I clicked it open. Their message was simple but direct. Nathan, we're restructuring our logistics division after several issues with Apex Logics. We'd like to discuss partnering with you directly. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. The company that put Apex Logics on the map now wanted me. The irony was almost poetic. The next day, I met with their director at a coffee shop downtown. He was an older man, sharp and straightforward. You built the system that made us efficient, he said. Since you left, everything's gone downhill. We're bleeding money. I don't care about family drama. I care about results. Can you fix this? I didn't hesitate. Yes. That contract changed everything. It doubled my company's size overnight and gave me the resources to expand. Within months, Stratos was competing directly with Apex Logics, not intentionally, but naturally. Clients wanted reliability, and that's what we offered. But the real twist came when word got around that I'd partnered with Apex Logics' biggest client. Suddenly, people started talking. Investors called me instead of them. Job applicants left Apex Logics to join Stratos. It was slow at first, quiet, almost invisible, but I could feel the shift. And somewhere deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. Because I wasn't just rebuilding anymore. I was reclaiming. And sooner or later, my father and brother were going to see exactly what happens when you take everything from the one person who knows how to build it all back, stronger, smarter, and unstoppable. I never set out to destroy them. At least, that's what I told myself at first. Revenge wasn't the plan, rebuilding was. But rebuilding has a strange way of revealing what people are truly made of. And when you've been betrayed by blood, every step forward starts to feel like a quiet act of justice. By the time Stratos Consulting hit its second year, I wasn't the broken man sitting in his car on a highway anymore. I was calm, strategic, calculated. What I had now wasn't just a company. It was leverage. I'd spent my whole career learning how to make systems work efficiently, but now I understood how to make people and timing work too. The logistics world is smaller than most people think. Word travels fast. A careless decision at one firm becomes an opportunity for another. And Apex Logics, well, they were making a lot of careless decisions. It started with the little whispers. An investor pulling out here, a client complaining there. I didn't start the rumors, but I didn't stop them either. Whenever someone called to ask, "Hey Nathan, do you know what's going on over at Apex Logics?" I'd just sigh lightly and say, "I wouldn't know. I haven't been part of that team for a long time." That line carried weight. It left people wondering why I left. And when people start wondering, they start digging. Meanwhile, I was patient. I focused on growth. I built a core team I could trust. Clara, who managed operations better than anyone I'd ever met. Noah, a quiet programmer with a gift for automation. And May, our project manager who could juggle 6 clients at once and still remember everyone's coffee order. They weren't just employees. They were the kind of people I wished I'd had around when Apex Logics began. And they believed in what we were building because it wasn't about ego, it was about excellence. But the more success we found, the more I realized something. Apex Logics' downfall wasn't a matter of if. It was a matter of when. About a year and a half after my father's public betrayal, I attended an industry conference in Chicago. One of those events where every logistics company sends someone to shake hands and trade buzzwords. I hadn't planned to go, but one of our newer clients insisted I attend. "You'll make good connections," he said. I figured why not. When I arrived, I almost turned right back around. Because who was standing at the registration desk, laughing and charming the event staff? My brother, Kyle. He looked different, a little older, slightly heavier, but still carrying that same self-satisfied grin. He spotted me instantly. "Nathan," he said, arms wide like we were long-lost friends. "Didn't expect to see you here." I forced a smile. "Kyle." He looked me up and down, clearly trying to assess how I was doing. "Still consulting?" "Something like that," I said. He smirked. "Good for you. Keeping busy." I could tell he thought I was small-time, some freelancer scraping by. And honestly, I preferred it that way. Let him underestimate me. The less he knew, the better. Over the next 2 days, I watched him work the room. He was good at appearances, suits tailored to perfection, firm handshake, practice charm. But when it came to the actual panels and Q&As, it was clear he didn't understand half the technical jargon. I overheard him on a call once, trying to explain their new cloud integration model. And he got so many terms wrong I had to step outside just to laugh. Still, What caught my attention wasn't his ignorance. It was his desperation. His company's booth looked polished, but their traffic was thin. Their presentation materials bragged about partnerships I knew for a fact had already ended. And during one coffee break, I overheard him talking to a potential investor, promising major growth and a groundbreaking AI expansion that sounded suspiciously like the kind of thing I'd actually built years ago. That's when I realized Apex Logics was running on fumes. The next week, I started doing my homework. I called a few industry contacts, read some reports, and even had one of my team members dig into Apex Logics' public filings. The picture that emerged was worse than I imagined. They'd overexpanded. Their cash flow was shaky, and they were late delivering on two major contracts, one of which was with a government logistics project. That kind of failure doesn't just hurt your reputation. It kills it. And yet, my father was still on their board, still backing Kyle's decisions. It made me wonder, was he blind? Or was he just too proud to admit he'd chosen the wrong son? Clara was the first to notice my change in behavior. One evening, as we were closing up the office, she said, "You've been quiet lately. Are you thinking about them again?" I leaned back in my chair, staring at the city lights outside. Not thinking. Planning. She frowned. Planning what? I hesitated for a moment before saying softly, "A correction." She didn't press me for details, but I think she understood. From that moment on, I started laying the groundwork. I wasn't going to attack them directly. That would have been too obvious, too crude. No, I wanted this to unfold naturally, like gravity doing its work. I wanted the collapse to look like it was of their own making, which, in truth, it already was. I just needed to help it along. The first step was reclaiming what was mine, not the company name, but the people, the clients, the systems that had always been my creation. I knew their tech inside and out because I'd built the foundation myself. I knew their weak spots, the inefficiencies they never understood. Through careful networking, I began quietly reaching out to some of Apex Logics' remaining clients. Not with offers, but with questions. How's your experience been lately? Have they been meeting timelines? I wasn't selling anything. I was listening. And the stories that came back were damning. Missed deadlines. Poor communication. Hidden fees. One client in particular, a high-profile European distributor, told me they were on the verge of terminating their contract. "They don't even answer emails anymore," the representative said in frustration. "We used to work with you back then. You always delivered." That was all I needed to hear. I didn't pitch. I just said, "If you ever need an alternative, my door's open." 3 weeks later, they called. And that deal alone doubled our quarterly revenue. But it wasn't just about stealing business. I wanted to understand what my father and brother were doing and why. I needed eyes inside. So when an old Apex Logics employee, Ethan, reached out saying he'd had enough, I offered him a job immediately. He'd been with them for 5 years, long enough to see everything. Over coffee one morning, he told me what I suspected: chaos. "Kyle spends more time on PR than actual management," he said. "Your dad still tries to pull strings behind the scenes, but no one listens to him anymore. They've lost 3 senior engineers this quarter. People are quitting every week." He hesitated before adding, "They're trying to land a new deal to save themselves. Something big. Government contract in South America. If it fails, they're done." I didn't respond right away. I just stirred my coffee, mind racing. A government contract meant oversight, audits, and public accountability, the kind of pressure Apex Logics couldn't handle. And if they failed spectacularly enough, it wouldn't just ruin their finances. It would ruin their credibility permanently. I didn't need to sabotage them. They were already standing on a trapdoor. I just had to wait for them to pull the lever themselves. In the meantime, I kept strengthening Stratos. We expanded into 3 new markets, opened a satellite office overseas, and introduced a proprietary logistics platform, one I'd been designing quietly for over a year. It was faster, smarter, and more adaptive than anything Apex Logics had ever dreamed of. And when we launched it publicly, the timing couldn't have been more perfect. Because, as fate would have it, Apex Logics' big government project had just hit the news for all the wrong reasons. A leaked report revealed delays, budget overruns, and inadequate system performance. The article didn't mention names, but industry insiders knew exactly which company it was. Within days, social media lit up with speculation. Investors panicked. Clients pulled out. And then, just like that, the calls started coming. "Nathan, are you taking on new clients?" "Hey, I heard about what happened to Apex Logics. Can we talk? I knew you were the one holding that place together. Each conversation felt surreal. The same people who once congratulated my father and brother were now reaching out to me. It wasn't triumph I felt. Not yet. It was something quieter, controlled, a sense that the balance was finally shifting. One night, after everyone left the office, I sat alone in the dark, thinking about how far things had come. The man who'd once looked me in the eye and said, "You'll understand someday," had built his empire on my back. And now, that empire was cracking from the inside out. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Because understanding wasn't enough. Now, it was time for him, for both of them, to feel it. And I had the perfect way to make that happen. It's strange how revenge doesn't feel the way you imagine it will. You think it's going to be this explosive, fiery moment, the kind that fills you with adrenaline and satisfaction. But when it finally happens, when everything falls into place exactly how you planned, it's quiet, controlled, almost elegant. By the time I made my move, Apex Logics was already hanging by a thread. Their government project had gone public for all the wrong reasons: delayed deliverables, malfunctioning systems, missing data. Every major industry outlet had picked up the story. Investors wanted out. Clients were leaving one after another. And in the middle of it all, Ka was still smiling for the cameras, insisting everything was under control. That's the thing about people like him. They believe that charisma can fix anything, that if they talk fast enough, smile wide enough, they can convince the world the fire behind them is just a sunset. But you can't charm numbers. You can't bluff a system that doesn't work. I didn't have to do much. Just one well-placed conversation. The government agency managing their contract was considering whether to give Apex Logics one last extension. They were hesitant, but still debating. That's when one of my old contacts, someone who used to work with me during the early Apex days, reached out to ask if I'd heard about their situation. "I have," I said carefully. "They're in over their heads." He sighed. "We're thinking of bringing in an external consultant to assess their systems." Objectively, of course. It took everything in me not to smile. "I could recommend someone," I said. "But you should know, I designed those systems before I left. If you really want an objective assessment, I could help you understand what's wrong." There was a pause on the line. Then he said, "You do that?" "I do it the right way." 2 weeks later, I was sitting in a conference room, laptop open, walking through the same architecture I'd built years ago. Only now, it was barely recognizable. They'd changed so many core functions, ignored updates, bypassed safety checks. It was like watching someone repaint a bridge until it collapsed. When I presented my findings to the oversight board, I kept my tone professional. No emotion, no gloating, just facts. These failures weren't caused by the original design, I explained. They stem from unauthorized modifications and poor version management. Whoever approved these changes didn't understand the system's dependencies. One of the board members leaned forward. "Can the system be salvaged?" I looked him straight in the eye. "Not under the current leadership." The report was public record. Within days, it spread through the industry like wildfire. Investors saw it. Clients saw it. And most importantly, my father saw it. Apex Logics' stock, what little value it had left, plummeted. 2 of their biggest contracts were canceled. Their headquarters downsized within the month. People started leaving en masse. I didn't celebrate. I didn't post about it. I didn't even tell my team what I'd done. I just watched. One evening, as I was finishing up at the office, Clara knocked on my door. "You've seen the news?" she asked. I nodded. She hesitated. "They're saying Apex Logics might declare bankruptcy." I stared out the window. "They'll survive a little longer. People like my father don't admit defeat easily." And I was right. Because 2 weeks later, I got the call. It was from my father himself. His voice sounded older, thinner, like someone who'd been fighting a war he couldn't win. "Nathan," he said, clearing his throat. "We need to talk." For a moment, I considered hanging up. But curiosity got the better of me. "About what?" He sighed. "Things have gotten complicated. We're restructuring. Kyle's struggling to manage the fallout. We could use your help." There it was, the same tone he used when I was a teenager fixing the family computer. Only this time, it wasn't about a screen freezing. It was about an empire collapsing. I let the silence hang just long enough for him to feel it. Then I said, "I don't work for Apex Logics anymore." "You don't have to," he said quickly. "We could merge. Combine resources. Stratos and Apex, together again. For the family." That word, Family hit differently now. Once it meant loyalty. Now it just sounded like manipulation dressed in nostalgia. I kept my voice calm. You didn't want family when you gave my company away. He exhaled sharply. You'll understand someday, he started to say. That same line, the one that haunted me. I cut him off. No, Dad. I understand now. He went quiet. I could hear the faint hum of an office in the background, maybe his desk phone, maybe Kyle pacing somewhere near him. Then he said, quietly, you'll regret this. But I didn't. A few weeks later, Apex Logix's bankruptcy became official. The company was bought out by a larger logistics firm at a fraction of its former valuation. Kyle was stripped of his CEO title and relegated to a consultant role, which, from what I heard, lasted less than 3 months before they let him go. My father lost his board seat. The legacy he'd tried to protect crumbled into dust. I thought that would be the end of it. But life has a way of writing the perfect epilogue. One afternoon, I was meeting with a new client at a downtown cafe. As I was leaving, I saw someone sitting alone near the window, head down, hair unkempt, a half-empty coffee cup in front of him. It took me a second to recognize him. Kyle. He looked up just as I was about to walk past. His eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed into something that wasn't quite anger, more like shame trying to hide behind arrogance. Nathan, he said, forcing a smile. Didn't expect to see you here. I stopped. For a moment, we just looked at each other. The silence between us was heavy, filled with all the things we'd never said. How's work? I asked finally. He gave a bitter laugh. Work? Yeah, about that. Turns out investors don't love the whole failed government contract thing. I nodded slowly. That tends to happen when you promise things you can't deliver. He shrugged, pretending not to care. You always were the detail guy. Guess that paid off. It did. He looked away, his voice quieter. Dad's not talking much these days. Stays home mostly. Keeps saying he just wanted us to stick together. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. When I finally turned to leave, he said something that made me stop mid-step. You got what you wanted, huh? I looked back at him. No, I said softly. I got what I earned. And I walked out. That night, I drove out to the old Apex Logix building. It was empty now, windows dark, for lease signs taped to the glass. I parked across the street and just sat there for a while, watching the reflection of my headlights fade against the metal siding. This was where it had all started. Where I'd worked through nights on cheap coffee and too much hope. Where my father once said he was proud of me. Where I'd learned that love without respect isn't love at all. It's control. I got out of the car and stood on the sidewalk. The air was cold, quiet. I could almost hear the ghosts of those early days. The clatter of keyboards, the hum of servers, my younger self dreaming big inside those walls. For a moment, I thought about going inside, just to see it one last time. But then I realized I didn't need to. The building wasn't my legacy anymore. I was. As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed. A message from Clara. Contract confirmed. The client signed the 5-year deal. Congratulations, boss. I smiled. Not because of the money, or the win, or the symbolism, but because it felt like closure. I'd spent years chasing my father's approval, thinking that success meant being seen, being recognized. But now I understood something far simpler. That peace doesn't come from proving others wrong. It comes from knowing who you are, even when no one else does. I looked back one last time at the building across the street. Hollow, lifeless, irrelevant. And then I whispered to the empty air, more for myself than anyone else. You were right, Dad. I paused, letting the words settle. I do understand now. Then I got in my car, started the engine, and drove away, not from my past, but toward everything I'd built on my own terms. And this time, I didn't look back.